All right, everybody, welcome to Satsang. It's July 9th, 2026. I know that because July 8th was yesterday, and my wife reminded me that it was our anniversary. So there you go.
Congrats.
But that's what it takes for me to remember the dates.
Oh, wow.
Happy anniversary. What number is that, Alan?
31.
All right.
31. Yeah,
Great.
yeah. So anyway. All right. So today we're going to talk. I think you guys will really enjoy this today. We've got a little bit of um, got some stuff. We have a little bit of Arjuna and Krishna in the middle here, and come up in a few minutes. And but it's about death, and but what it does is it ties into family, and that's what we're going to talk about today is family and how family lives for us in terms of an unseen identification. So. So the pointer, it's from Pointers from Nisargadatta Maharaj by Ramesh, and it's titled "In the Face of Death." That's correct. It's that book, Donovan, and it's number three. And it's actually, I think, in the book one of the most impactful pieces that you'll read. And I think just that if you go out onto the website, I think just that one's there if you want to grab it. Um, so let me start, and you guys will see pretty much immediately what's going on. The visitor, my only son, died a few days ago in a car accident, and I find it almost impossible to accept his death with a philosophical fortitude. I know I'm not the first person to suffer such bereavement. I also know that each one of us has to die sometime. I have in my mind sought solace from all the usual ploys by which one consoles oneself and others in such predicaments, and yet I come back to one tragic fact that a cruel fate should deprive my son of everything in the prime of his life. Why? Why? I keep on asking myself, Sir, I cannot get over my grief. So imagine someone coming to satsang and starting us off with that. Maharaj, after sitting for a minute or so, and that's a long time with his eyes closed, he says, "It is unavailing and futile to say that I am grieved because of the absence of self, me as an individual. There are no others, and I see myself mirrored in all of you. Obviously, you have not come for mere sympathy, which you surely must have received in abundance from your relatives and friends. Remember, one goes through life year after year enjoying the usual pleasures and suffering from the usual pains, but never once seeing life in its true perspective. And what is that true perspective? It is this: there is no me, nor you. There never could be any such entities. Every man should understand this and have the courage to live his life with this understanding." Here's the question of the whole thing. Do you have this courage, my friend, or must you wallow in what you call your grief? And he's not saying that from a dismissive standpoint. He's saying that from a standpoint of now you're at this junction and you're feeling what you're feeling. Did you come to ask a question because you want the courage to make a shift, or will you wallow in the grief in a continual way? The visitor says, "Maharaj, pardon me. I do not fully understand what you have said, but I do feel startled and shaken. I would. You have exposed the core of my being, and what you have said so pithily appears to be the golden key to my life. Please elaborate on what you have just said. What exactly is it that I must do?" Do, do absolutely nothing. Just see the transient as the transient, the unreal as the unreal, the false as the false, and you will realize your true nature. You have mentioned your grief. Have you ever looked grief in the face and tried to understand it? To lose somebody or something you have loved dearly is bound to cause sorrow. Since death is total annihilation with absolute finality, the sorrow caused by it is unmitigated. But even this overwhelming sorrow cannot last long if you intellectually analyze it. What exactly are you grieving for? Go back to the beginning. Did you and your wife make any agreement with somebody that you would have a son, a particular body, and that he would have a particular destiny? Is it not a fact that his conception itself was a chance? That the fetus survived many hazards and the womb was another matter of chance? That the baby was a boy was yet another chance? In other words, what you called your son was just a chance event happening over which you have no control at any time. And now that event has come to an end. What exactly are you grieving for? Are you grieving for the few pleasant experiences and the many painful experiences that your son has missed in the years to come? Or are you really and truly grieving for the pleasures and conveniences that you will no longer be able to receive from him? Think about that. Mind you, all of this is from the point of view of the false. Nonetheless, are you with me so far? And he says, the visitor says, what do you mean when you said that this is all on the level of false? Perfect question, by the way, huh? Now we should come to some truth. Maharaj says, please understand as truth that you are not an individual, a person. A person that one thinks one is only a product of imagination, and the self is a victim of this illusion. Person cannot exist in its own right. It is the self consciousness that mistakenly believes that there is a person and is conscious of being it. Change your viewpoint. Don't look at the world as something outside yourself. See the person you imagine yourself to be as part of the world, really a dream world, which you perceive as an appearance in your consciousness. Look at the whole show from the outside in, not inside out. Think about that's what witnessing is, right? Witnessing is moving from inside out to outside in. It's exactly what it is. Remember, you are not the mind, which is nothing but the content of consciousness. As long as you identify yourself with the body mind, you are vulnerable to sorrow and suffering. Outside the mind, there is just being, not being father or son, this or that. You are beyond time and space, in contact with them only at the point of now and here, but otherwise timeless, spaceless, and invulnerable to any experience. Understand this and grieve no more. Once you realize that there's nothing in this world that you can or need to call your own, notice ownership, you will look at it from the outside. As you look at the play on the stage or a movie on the screen, admiring and enjoying, perhaps suffering, but deep down, quite unmoved. Right? So that's the piece. So imagine.
What was witnessing again? Sorry, Alan. What the
So witness.
definition you used?
All I was saying was that witnessing when when one is identified with something, it's always them, and they're always looking at everything else as the outside. So they're looking from the inside, from here out, right? When one is witnessing, there's actually the experience of being on the outside, and in fact, on the inside is the body mind that you are, right? And it creates what a lot of times we call it's a sense of I call it a sense of distance. Words don't really, words don't help. But I think the reason it feels like a distance is because the intensity of identification when you're on the inside diminishes when the witnessing is occurring. In other words, that really intense sense of identification actually starts to dissolve through the witnessing itself, right? And in fact, the minute, and you'll hear this in a second, but the minute that there is a sense, oh, this needs to be witnessed, right? The first step has already been taken. You'll notice immediately upon that thought that the intensity of identification from the inside, it's already felt to start, right? And then the movement into the witnessing position and the dissolution of what's inside, right? So if you think of identification as an installation, All right. So it would be really interesting, wouldn't it, to sit down? It would somebody with a calculator could do this for us. But conditioning happens over hours every single day, right? So think of the rat-a-tat, rat-a-tat, rat-a-tat of how we're conditioned into believing that we are who we are. If you could figure out all the hours that are in your life, right, you could kind of figure how many hours you have been subject to conditioning, right? And then if I said, okay, put that number over here, right, and then over here put the amount of numbers that you've witnessed. Now, I'm just going to say those numbers are going to be really, really different, right? So witnessing itself, right? The awakening is the installation into witnessing, right? So think about what it took for the installation into identification, right? Because people come in and they say, "Oh my God, I've been witnessing for all this time," and I'm like, "Yeah, think about the hours you spent getting identified, conditioned into identification." Now, yes, it's for most folks, right? It's likely to take some time to be installed in witnessing. And then most everybody who I work with, and I'm sure usually when I make this um, statement, everybody nods their head because I go, look, there's a lot of people and I watch them and they come to the fork in the road and there's kind of like the easy way and the hard way, right? So I've always picked the hard way. Whatever the long, hardest possibility is, it seems like I got in that line. Now, I don't try to get in that line because I watch the people that get in the other one, but somehow or another, when it comes right down to it. So a lot of us that meditate and witness and are involved in the spiritual journey, right? We're there for a long time, right? And that's just part of how that is. And so like I say, it doesn't mean that some people don't have an immediate response. It's different, right? But I'm not in that club. So, and I suspect most everybody in here isn't either. So there is kind of a rainbow up there somewhere, just recognize what reality is, right?
What were you saying about the going off the cliff and you would see someone else? So far, so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Osho used to say that. He would say seeking is like jumping into a bottomless chasm. And what you can do about that is as you're hurtling through the air and passing each other, you can kind of wink and go, so far, so good. That's how he describes spiritual seekers. And that's really true. Yeah, I mean,
Beautiful.
yeah, because people say that to me often. They go, why did you start this? And I think, oh my God, you know how many years I spent doing this without having any idea why I was doing it? I have no earthly idea. I just know I was highly motivated, compelled to do it. That's all I can tell you about seeking. It's like jumping into that bottomless chasm. I have no idea what's at the bottom or if there is a bottom. I just know I'm flying. So that's how that one is. All right. So here's the piece here's the add-on for today. It's called Family, the Ultimate Glue. So the prosperous and time-honored partnership of Nasruddin, we've talked about Nasruddin before, and Kutbuddin threatened to go on the rocks when Kutbuddin fell hopelessly in love with Nasruddin's wife. That's bad news for a good friendship. Nasruddin, displaying his usual remarkable flexibility, finally said, "This thing cannot continue forever. One way or the other, this matter must be settled. We've always been sporting men," Kutbuddin replied. "Why don't we play a game of backgammon to decide who gets the girl?" Nasruddin considered the proposal carefully. "Very well," he finally agreed. "But let's make this more interesting. A quarter of a point per game, right?" So, like all great Nasruddin stories, the laughter arrives before the understanding. First, we laugh because the priorities seem absurd. A wife is wagered as casually as a deck of cards, while a quarter per point suddenly introduces genuine seriousness into the game. Money matters. The wife apparently doesn't. But the deeper humor is not really about Nasruddin, it's about us. The story momentarily exposes a hidden compartment in consciousness. We immediately recognize something has been violated, yet we cannot quite explain why. Why is the wife not the serious wager? Why does the quarter suddenly matter? Because the story quietly steps outside a structure that normally remains invisible. Family occupies a very peculiar place in human consciousness. It lives inside what I've often called the as-if state. We live as if family possesses a reality unlike every other relationship, as if blood establishes permanence, as if my mother, my father, my son, or my daughter describes something ultimately true rather than something functionally useful. As if these relationships stand outside the inquiry we willingly apply everywhere else. That's why the story's funny. Nasruddin accidentally stepped outside the compartment for one brief moment. He no longer treats family as sacred territory. The compartment is exposed. And because we recognize it instantly, we laugh. Not because we approve, not because we disapprove. We laugh because we have always known the compartment was there. Family is the ultimate glue. Not because family is the problem, because identification finds no stronger adhesive. Identification is the glue of, I always say that is the glue of the ego. So when they say they're going to destroy your ego, they're not talking about your ego. They're talking about dissolving the glue. Right? Everything else survives. It's just the glue. I used to remember my mother when they came out with the hydrogen bomb, right? And they said, well, the hydrogen bomb basically it kills all the people and leaves all the stuff behind. And my mother said, really cool. She said, can we get the other one that destroys all the stuff and leaves the people? That was her first question, right? Says, we have spoken many times in this room about identification. The body mind appears, consciousness identifies with it, and from that single moment arises a sense of individuality. I am this, my story, my experience. Right? Now remember, individuality in its felt sense is actually universal consciousness. It's just when we feel it, we identify it as individual, but it's not. Programming belonging to this particular body mind gradually disappears beneath ordinary awareness. Thoughts become automatic, emotional reactions become automatic, preferences become automatic. Eventually, the entire structure begins operating by itself. We call this conditioning. The fascinating thing about conditioning is not that it exists, it must exist. Without conditioning, body mind couldn't function. Driving a car would require learning it anew every morning. Language would disappear overnight. Recognition itself would become impossible. Automatic functioning is not the problem. Identification with automatic functioning is the problem. Family represents perhaps the oldest and deepest identification of them all. So think about this for a minute, because this is really, really important. Long before we acquire a profession, long before we choose a religion, long before we adopt a political opinion, long before even we possess a coherent image of ourselves, family has already been installed. It arrives before memory becomes reliable, before reasoning develops, before independent judgment is possible. It becomes the operating system upon which every later relationship is constructed. Think about it. You're in the soup of family before you can even say a word. You're already planted there. Then society quietly reinforces it as if that weren't enough again and again. Honor your family, protect your family, stand by your family, never question your family. The reinforcement is so complete that eventually questioning the identification itself begins to feel immoral. Notice what has happened. The identification has become sacred. Not love. And we all think family is based on love. Not love. Identification. These two are not the same thing. Love requires no ownership. Identification does. See that difference? A lot of times when we're acting around, a lot of times when it's a family thing that's involved, we are talking about love, and actually we're identified. Family is the ultimate glue, not because blood possesses mystical power, not because love itself binds us, because identification became so early, so deep, and so universally protected that we stopped seeing it altogether. It becomes transparent. Now, many sincere seekers gradually begin noticing this process in other areas of life. The watching opens, the identification with other things besides family. Thoughts are observed, emotions are observed. Old stories lose their authority. That feeling that I talked about, that dissolving when you go from identification to watching, right? The need for validation begins softening. The separate self is no longer believed quite so completely. Then a family situation arises. Perhaps a criticism from a parent, a disagreement with a sibling, concern for a child, a holiday gathering, a phone call. Almost instantly, something remarkable happens. The openness disappears, watching collapses. Yeah. The spaciousness that seemed so obvious only moments earlier vanishes as though somebody switched off the lights. The old story rushes back with astonishing force. The body tightens, thoughts races, emotion floods consciousness. Identification returns so completely that it seems impossible anything else was ever true. I call this blacking out. Not because awareness disappears. Awareness never disappears, because identification becomes so complete that awareness is no longer recognized. And we talk about awareness being the canvas on which everything else is painted. And when it's all covered, you no longer see the awareness. Well, if you want to cover it fast, do something family related. Covers the canvas right now. Many seekers interpret this as failure. It's not failure. It's simply the strongest conditioning revealing itself. Family is the ultimate glue. And not because it's the strongest glue, it becomes one of the greatest, and because it's the strongest glue, it becomes one of the greatest teachers. Not when everything's peaceful, not when relationships are easy, not when everybody agrees. Those moments teach very little. The teaching appears precisely when the glue tightens. When the blackout happens, when the old identity rushes back, that's the moment the watching becomes real. Not watching while nothing much is happening, watching while everything seems to be happening. But that's the difference. It's exactly here in chapter 3 of Pointers from Nisargadatta Maharaj becomes one of the most uncompromising dialogues in the entire Advaitic literature. A man comes to Maharaj having just lost his son in an automobile accident. The grief is overwhelming. Nothing the intellect has offered has touched it. He's reminded himself that everybody dies. He has tried acceptance. He's tried philosophy. He's tried reason. Nothing has reached the place where grief is actually living. Finally, he says, I cannot get over my grief. Maharaj closes his eyes for a few minutes. There's no rush to answer, no immediate philosophy, no attempt to comfort, and then quietly says, one goes through life enjoying the usual pleasures and suffering the usual pains, but never once seeing life in its true perspective. Then comes the hammer blow. What is the true perspective? There is no me, there is no you. There never could be any such entities. And then with extraordinary compassion and extraordinary precision, he asks the question that echoes through the entire dialogue. Do you have this courage, my friend, or must you wallow in what you call your grief? Right. Now, this is true of every family identification, right? So death is one of that. Death is a really great one. The grieving father is visibly shaken. He admits he does not fully understand what Maharaj has said, yet something mistakable has been touched. It is though the floor beneath his grief has shifted, even if the grief itself has not. He asked Maharaj to explain further. What follows is one of the most penetrating examination of identification in all of Maharaj's recorded conversation. Notice that Maharaj does not begin with consolation. He does not begin with theology. He does not begin with promises that time heals all wounds. He begins where Advaita always begins, with the assumption. Right? What's the assumption? Because if the assumption remains untouched, every attempt at comfort merely strengthens the illusion it hopes to relieve. You got to get to the assumption. Maharaj asks a series of remarkably simple questions. Was there ever an agreement that your particular child would be born? Pause. Was conception itself not a happening? Pause again. Was the survival of the fetus not a happening? Was the moment of birth not a happening? Was a child's temperament chosen? His intelligence, his interests, his body, his destiny, his death? One by one, the assumptions begin falling away. Each question quietly removes another block from the structure. Not aggressively, almost gently until very little remains. What you called my son, Maharaj points out, was from beginning to end a movement within totality, not your creation, not your possession, not your accomplishment, happening in consciousness. The body appeared, life unfolded, the body disappeared, exactly as countless bodies have always appeared and disappeared. My dad used to say, nobody gets out alive. Then Maharaj asks perhaps the most uncomfortable question in the entire dialogue. What exactly are you grieving for? Again, pause there. Not because he lacks compassion, because he possesses enough compassion to refuse easy answers. What exactly are you grieving for? Are you grieving because your son has missed certain pleasures that might have occurred in the future? Are you grieving because you yourself have lost the companionship, affection, and support and continuity you unconsciously expected to receive? Your family unconsciously gets identified, and the expectations from that identification arise. That's why when anything happens in family that doesn't stack up, everything goes crazy inside. You're not getting what it is you're supposed to. I made this deal around family. I want to get what's supposed to come back. My brother's not supposed to act like an idiot, right? My dad's not supposed to throw crap at me, whatever happens to be. The question lands like a hammer, not because it accuses, because it exposes. Grief begins revealing its hidden architecture. It's not merely sadness. It is identification, warning the interruption of its own story. That's what grief is. Right? Identification, mourning the interruption of its own story. This is one of Maharaj's greatest gifts. He never dismisses human feeling. He simply asks us to examine what feeling is attached to. There is an enormous difference. Advaita is often misunderstood here. People imagine that Maharaj is asking the father not to grieve. Nothing could be further from the truth. The tears belong, the ache belongs, the emptiness belongs. The body-mind experience is exactly what the body-mind experiences. What Maharaj questions is something entirely different. Ownership. Remember, identification and ownership go together. The assumption, my son, my loss, my grief. Notice how naturally those words arise. They seem self-evident, yet Maharaj quietly asks whether they are. Right? The word my, the word mine. Right? What does that do? It identifies what is in ownership. I'm identified with it. I own it. It's mine. Family is the ultimate glue, not because love binds us. Love has no need to possess. Identification does. The glue is ownership. The glue is memory claiming continuity. I want it to go the way I expected it to go. I made this deal. The glue is the unquestioned assumption that this relationship possesses an independent existence outside the seamless movement of consciousness. Love remains beautifully possible without ownership. Ownership is impossible without identification. That distinction changes everything. Ramesh often referred to the Gita because Arjuna's dilemma reveals exactly the same mechanism. Standing on the battlefield, Arjuna looks across and sees not enemies, but family, his teachers, his cousin, his relative, his history, his identity. Immediately functioning collapses. He cannot move. He cannot fight. He can't even think clearly. Most people imagine Arjuna's paralysis is caused by compassion. It's deeper than compassion. It's identification. The role family member has temporarily become stronger than the spontaneous functioning of totality through that particular body mind. Krishna does not tell Arjuna to become heartless. He does not ask him to suppress emotion, nor does he suggest becoming detached in the ordinary psychological sense. Instead, he points beneath the entire structure. You may decide not to fight, but your very nature will not allow the decision to stand. Then comes one of the most astonishing statements in all of Scripture. I have already killed them. How extraordinary. Not because Krishna is advocating violence, because he is dismantling ownership. Krishna represents consciousness in this case, right? I have already killed them. The event already belongs to totality. Arjuna is not being asked to create the future. He's being asked to stop claiming authorship of it. Family is the ultimate glue, even on the battlefield, even in the presence of death, even before Krishna himself, the glue remains powerful. And because it remains powerful, it becomes one of the finest opportunities for inquiry available. Every seeker eventually discovers there are certain situations in which the separate self appears almost invincible. For some, it's money, others, reputation, for still others, help. But for many, almost all of us, it's family. That discovery is not disappointing, it's invaluable, because now the strongest identification has finally revealed itself, not theoretically, directly. The next time the blackout happens, notice it. Not afterward with regret, not by trying to repair it, not by constructing another spiritual identity around having failed. Don't get humble. Simply notice. The phone rings. The conversation begins. The body tightens. Thought accelerates. The old role rushes back. I am the son. I am the father. I am the sister. I am the one who has always ... Watch. That's the time to watch. The very moment you notice the glue, something remarkable has already happened. You are no longer completely inside it. Right? The compartment has become visible. It may still be operating. It may still feel overwhelming. It has been seen. And what was once been seen can never again become entirely invisible. That's why I say family is not the obstacle, it's the laboratory. The strongest conditioning becomes the clearest teacher. Watching during meditation is relatively easy. Watching while sitting quietly in nature is relatively easy. Watching while everybody agrees with you is relatively easy. Watching while your oldest family story has just been triggered, that's where understanding begins to become a living understanding. Maharaj did not ask the grieving father to stop loving his son. He asked him whether he had the courage to discover what love had become attached to. Right? There's tremendous compassion in that question, because if ownership dissolves, love does not disappear. It becomes cleaner, freer, less burdened, less afraid. Outside the mind, Maharaj says, there is only being, not father, not son, not husband, not wife, not family. Being, appearing temporarily as all of these, then disappearing again. Like characters crossing a stage, the play remains moving, the tears remain real, the laughter remains genuine, but the audience does not mistake itself for the actors. The audience is the watching. being itself. Near the end of the dialogue, Maharaj offers one of the most beautiful descriptions in his teaching. Once you realize that there is nothing in this world that you can or need to call your own, you will look at it from the outside, as you look at a play on a stage or a movie on the screen, admiring and enjoying, perhaps suffering, but deep down quite unmoved. Interesting word, quite unmoved, not indifferent, not emotionally numb, not withdrawn from life, unmoved, because the ground of being has not shifted. Experience continues, love continues, relationship continues, compassion continues, but ownership quietly dissolves. Family is the ultimate glue, and that is precisely why it becomes the greatest invitation. Not an invitation to withdraw from family, not an invitation to love less, an invitation to see more clearly. Try to notice the moment identification returns, to notice the blackout, to notice the ancient story quietly regaining the stage. Then simply watch, because the moment the glue is seen, it loosens. Every moment ownership is questioned, space appears. Every moment the compartment is recognized, it ceases to be absolute. Maharaj's final question was never addressed only to the grieving father. It was addressed to each of us. Every time family appears, every time the story returns, every time the glue feels stronger than awareness itself. Do you have the courage? Not the courage to stop loving, the courage to discover what you are has never been held together by glue at all. So that's the piece on family. So tell me, any comments or input at this point?
Well,
So, yeah,
Go ahead.
I want to say something.
Yeah.
So it seems like this sense of separate self
Uh-huh.
in this language of ownership is a question of ownership.
Mm-hmm.
So even in this identification with separate self, which I'm all about identifying with separate self,
Know that.
but that in itself, this is a new piece. That's a question of ownership. So
Yeah.
the question is, do you have the courage to let go of all ownership?
Well, ownership dissolves by itself, so the letting go is simply the watching of it because it's in the installation and the witness position, right? That dissolves the ownership in the identified position. So what you're saying is technically correct. It's just that you don't want to carry my acceptance out into the watching space. That's just simply acceptance itself.
But he uses the word courage.
Yep.
That really struck me that he used the word courage.
Yep.
So it's, do you have the courage to be witness? Is that
Well,
to step out of identification in a sense?
well, courage is so it's a funny one because what happens is that he would always use the term earnestness,
Hmm.
right? And he would say, that the earnestness or the drive or there's all of the words for that behavior. And courage is another one, right? So one way of saying it is, do you have the courage? Another way of saying it is the courage there, right? So that's the passive way to say the same thing. Because nobody is sitting here in this conversation that doesn't already, I mean, that it's demonstrated earnestness to be sitting here anyway. So we already know that the courage or the earnestness is there. And now we're up against the most difficult of all the identifications, family. And all we're doing is calling that into play. Is it there?
I would wonder, is the most, for me, the most strongest identification is with self rather than with family. It's like this seeing self as a, always when he says there is no me and there is no you. So I have a strong identification with me and you.
Yeah, I get that. And I don't know that we're saying it. I don't think we're saying a different thing.
Mhm.
Um,
I
you
would
know,
like to ask, do you trigger yourself like family can trigger you? This gentleman, he said, because a lot of it's about being triggered, right? By the
Yeah, sure. So that I can buy. That's right. We get
yeah.
triggered the most by the closest people to us.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
So all I'm saying is that when you're acting as yourself, you're really not thinking about yourself, right? The actions happen without sense of self, but when you're acting out of identification, it's usually as to something that's mine, my family, what I expect. That's
Right.
where the
Yes,
ownership, right?
that's right.
So that's what I said. I think we're saying the same thing. It's just
Yes.
that we don't go around thinking about, myself as we're being ourselves, right? That's happening by itself. So the fact that the self is the one we're most identified with, that kind of happens as a result of all the identifications. We start to assume that that's who we are, is the separate self.
Right.
And Alan, if I could just say a word about courage,
Sure.
I think in the moment, courage is are we willing to let the me dissolve the context that we're being confronted with? Or are we do we have the courage to dissolve the me in that moment
Yep.
and not stand on a hill? And I think that's where the courage comes into play.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
that's
all I'm
good.
all I'm saying, Ron, is that it's there. And I think when somebody says, "Do you have," what Maharaj is doing when he says that is trying to trigger what's already there.
I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you described it perfectly. But you always have to be careful when it sounds like a personal question, because ultimately there are no personal questions. But because that's what we traffic in, our language always holds questions as a personal. They tend to be personal rather than, um, from a watching position.
And unfortunately, when we communicate, courage is, comes out of duality,
Correct.
and so we have to kind of dance around it.
Yeah.
But you can feel in the moment when you're attached to something, when you're identified through ownership, and you have an opportunity to stand on that hill, or you have the opportunity to just let it all go. You know what I mean?
Yep.
To relax into it and not keep trying to claim the ownership. And it feels like courage on the inside because you feel like you're giving yourself up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. As I said, I mean, the minute that you say, "I'm going to watch this," right? The courage has been expressed, if you think about it, right? The minute you say, "I'm going to watch this," the courage has been expressed. That's where the installation, we're going to go back to the installation in watching, and away from the repeated installation and family is mine, in terms of family being the conditioning in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say anything about like when you're practicing something like this, the issue of like when you don't do it correctly and start beating yourself up, like why did I let myself get identified again? I'm just not supposed to be Sometimes I feel like it could come pile on top of what I'm already dealing with.
Right. So think about what you're saying, that there's an expectation there, right? And the expectation is that Donovan does shit correctly. And
Yes,
so when Donovan doesn't, what he does is he beats himself up for not having done that.
yes,
So that's that loop that you live in, right?
yes.
So now you can begin to even watch that. You can go, "Wait a minute," right?
Gotcha. Got it. Yep. That makes sense.
That's why you go in there and you say, "Hey, you didn't fail anything," right? In other words, the watching didn't happen, but the minute you see it, it's like, "Oh, what? Yeah, got it." In other words, that's a wonderful happening. It's just that we don't, right? We don't see it that way.
Sure.
Yeah, sometime back, Tim was talking to us about how he felt stuck. And I was like, "God, what a great thing," And I think he about fell off the map when we said that, because it just showed, he's moving along in this really wonderful, you know, movement, right? and all of a sudden he stayed in one place. Well, that's not going backwards, friends, right? This is good. This is a good thing. If you stop, if your quote unquote progress is stopped, hey, that's good. That's awesome because there's something going on there, right? But we're used to going, wait a minute, man, I need to be in movement. If I'm not in movement, then I failed. Same loop, right?
Yeah,
Amen.
his
Yes.
comment was
Yeah.
basically you look around and you see the ground around you and you say, "Oh, I must have fallen off the horse." And suddenly become aware of that
Yeah.
you were progressing, and all of a sudden here I am. Like,
Yeah.
whoops.
Yeah.
That was really helpful for me. That was a really helpful comment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Donovan, I actually use Donovan as an example. He doesn't know this, but Donovan is quite a surfer, right? But the one thing that, in my mind, this is just my mind, separates Donovan from almost every other surfer I know is that Donovan goes out and becomes the wave. Right? He doesn't surf competitive. Donovan does not surf to beat anybody. That's never in play when he surfs. Imagine if that was the rest of your life, Donovan. Right? That's what we're actually talking about here.
It's
Right?
interesting you say that because I used to say, I wish I could surf my life.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
I used
that's
to actually say that because I felt like I had some kind of a hold a bit on surfing, but then I
yeah.
get on land and yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful. Yeah.
I mean, that's it. So everybody in Oceanside who knows Donovan is like, what makes Donovan different is that when he surfs, right, there's nothing going on there except for the wave. Right. And it's when you see it, you're like the first thing your head does, there's something wrong, there's what's going on, right? Because all the other guys are out there trying to get better so that the next time that they're out there, they can look better or be better than the other dude, right?
Hey,
Thank you, Al. It's a beautiful.
can I make a comment in regards to Donovan, your judgment thing, your judgment question?
Please, yes.
It for me personally, it that's where self-inquiry seems to break that up immediately, because as soon as that inflow of internal dialogue is self-judging, then I just ask, to whom do these thoughts come? And there's an immediate relaxation because it dissolves the entity that's claiming that it's being
Yeah.
judged.
Yes.
And it seems like self-inquiry just fits in perfect in that moment. Just wanted to share that.
Beautiful. What is the line you use again? To whom is
Well,
this?
to whom do these thoughts come?
Beautiful. Thank you for that.
So that's Ramana Maharshi's, right? Little device to take you into watching, right? That's what it does.
I remember who am I, but I like that too. Who am I?
Well, who am I is exactly the same thing. That's what it does. That device takes you into watching,
They're cousins.
right?
Yeah. Beautiful.
Alan,
Yes.
I've been always late. Um, I knew this old medicine man. His name was Weasel Bear, was his last name.
Yeah.
And that was his last name, but he was a Cheyenne arrow priest. And he was, pretty strong medicine man. Anyways, I was in a ceremony with him one time, and you don't drink alcohol in these ceremonies. It's like pretty much of a no-no.
Yeah.
And this lady who didn't know better was kind of alcoholic. She snuck some beer in a thermos into this thing. And when you're in a teepee, there's a big fire going in there, so it gets kind of warm. And her thermos expanded, and it popped. You know what I'm saying? So it popped. So all of these people that very long time kind of ceremonial people got sprayed on their backs with this lady's beer. And they were not too happy about it. You know what I mean? They were being very, very polite about it, but they were not too happy about it. And the lady got pretty embarrassed. His name was Eugene Black Bear. That was his name, actually. He was, anyway. So she went up to him and she said, Eugene, I need to leave because I really cannot forgive myself. So he tells her, well, go back and sit down. He was from Oklahoma. He had that kind of accent. He goes, I'm going to tell you a story. I was married to two women, at the same time, and I forgive myself. So you can too. Anyway, I guess that kind of relates to your original joke.
It really does. Yeah.
And he was actually married to two women, Cheyenne style. You know, he had married two women. One was a Navajo, so the other one didn't know. But anyway, the reason I'm saying that is that sometimes, for me personally, I have to laugh at the foibles of this one when I watch it. You know what I mean? Because there's like in my little inquiry that I do, that this does, you know, I have this one foible that I wish wasn't there. You know what I mean? So what I've learned about it is, like, if I laugh about it, that's even for me stronger than any kind of anything else. You know what I mean? So I just thought I would offer that up.
Use humor.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Humor, yeah,
Why not?
humor is a great thing. It really is. It's a dissolver. It really is. Yeah, if you can laugh at what you do yourself, right? So I say, I mean, you're walking around, you're kind of a body, mind of free entertainment.
Yes, it's just pretty much true.
Yeah. So awesome. All right, guys.
This is a good one. Thanks as always, Alan.
Yeah,
Lots
you're welcome. I'm glad. It's
of
funny. On some of these, I get through, you know, and I'm like, and the mind goes, wait a minute, you know. But it's, to me, this is one of the very intense ones. If you think, I mean, when I think about somebody walking in and saying, "I just lost my only son," I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, that would be a hell of a conversation to, you know, to start with in a satsang. Could you imagine? We'd all be sitting here going,
Right.
you know, our eyes would all be this big, you know, and and yet, you know, there it is. The reality is the same. No, in the face of whatever it is, it's the same. It's the same thing.
And
You
when
know,
you started, the emotion was palpable. You can feel it. It was just
yeah.
like, whoa, yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, what the first time I read that, I'm like, what is one of the strongest things? I mean, I'm a paragraph in, I'm going, oh, okay. You know, I've sat in a lot of satsangs. I've never seen a man come in and just lost his only son in a car accident. I've never seen that particular kind of grief on display, you know, so that really is, that really is. And I think that's when you really start to see how intense the identification is with family. We fly into it automatically, right? Remember the automatic behavior one that we did? That's where you know, and it's the first thing we get. You know, I remember we would talk about Christianity, and because I was pretty clear, I wasn't touched by that. And somebody's like, dude, it came in your mother's breast milk, you know, because we live in a country, and if you look around, yeah, you may claim that you didn't get any, but you got some. If you live here, you got some. You know, so that's, it's always a play. So that's kind of how that is, and all of that gets delivered through family, most of the time through family. So anyway, all right, everybody, thank you for today.
Thank you.
It was a wonderful thing. I love you all, and I will
Thanks,
see you.
Alan.
Okay.
Thanks, Alan.
Fabulous. Love
Thanks,
you.
Alan. Thanks
See you
all.
at the next one.
Yeah.